Just after my husband's passing, a forgotten step-grandson emerged with a will that disinherited me. The only witness to the signing was a shadowy figure who quickly disappeared. "Where is this witness?" I demanded of the lawyers. Their evasiveness confirmed my fears. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a carefully orchestrated plot. Before we begin, share in the comments, what would you do in that situation? Every voice matters. The scent of lilies in sorrow hung heavy in the air as they lowered Arthur's casket into the earth. My Arthur, my rock, my love of 50 years. My hand trembled as I clutched the arm of our son, Ethan, his face etched with a grief that mirrored my own. People dabbed at their eyes, hushed murmurs circulating, a community in mourning. I, Eleanor, stood dry-eyed, a hollow ache where my heart used to be. Tears felt too light for the immense weight of loss that pressed down on me. The pallbearers, strong young men from Arthur's golf club, carefully guided the dark wood box, adorned with a spray of white roses, down into the freshly dug earth. Each shovelful of dirt hitting the lid felt like a hammer blow to my chest. Ethan, usually so composed, leaned into me, his shoulders shaking slightly. I squeezed his arm, a silent promise that we would navigate this raw pain together. It was then, as the eulogies concluded and the first clumps of earth began to fall, that a voice, smooth and unfamiliar, cut through the quiet reverence. "Grandma Eleanor, it's Julian." I turned, my brow furrowed, my eyes, still blurry from unshed tears, trying to focus. Standing beside Ethan, a young man, perhaps in his late 20s, offered a polite but oddly detached smile. His suit was a little too sharp, his hair a little too perfectly styled for the solemn occasion. Julian, Arthur's step-grandson from his first marriage, a child I'd met perhaps twice in passing decades ago at a distant family reunion. He'd never been part of our lives, not truly. No holiday cards exchanged, no birthday calls remembered. He was a phantom from a past life that had long since faded into background noise. Ethan looked at me, a flicker of surprise in his eyes as well. "Julian came, Mom," he murmured, as if explaining the unexpected guest. There was a faint curiosity in Ethan's voice, a bewildered acceptance of this sudden apparition. I simply nodded, my gaze lingering on Julian. There was something about his presence that felt manufactured, too composed for a funeral. His eyes, though ostensibly sorrowful, held a spark that was too alert, too calculating. He shook hands with a few bewildered relatives, offering condolences that sounded rehearsed. Later, at the reception held in our old family home, the spacious Victorian with its rambling gardens that Arthur and I had built together, brick by brick, memory by memory, Julian moved with an unnerving ease. He wasn't mingling so much as navigating, making calculated rounds, chatting with distant relatives he barely knew, his smile a little too wide, his laughter a little too loud. He was a stranger among our familiar faces, a discordant note in the symphony of shared grief. Our living room, usually filled with boisterous laughter and the comforting aroma of my baking, felt strangely stifled, his presence a peculiar weight. I watched him from the periphery, a quiet alarm beginning to chime in the back of my mind. It was during a quiet moment, as I poured myself a cup of lukewarm tea, the delicate porcelain clinking softly, that Julian approached me. He moved with a quiet purpose, sidling up as if drawn by some invisible magnetic force. His voice was low, almost conspiratorial, as if he were sharing a secret only for my ears. "Grandfather Arthur spoke of you often, Eleanor. How devoted you were, how you cared for him in his final days." He paused, his gaze sweeping around the familiar room as if evaluating its contents. Then he dropped the bombshell. He also mentioned a new will. Something about ensuring my future, given recent developments. My teacup clattered slightly against the saucer, a sharp sound in the otherwise hushed room. A new will, my mind reeled. Arthur and I had an ironclad will, drawn up decades ago, updated every few years, always leaving everything to me, and then to Ethan, and our beloved grandchildren, Lily and Sam. Arthur was meticulously organized about such things, legal documents were his domain. "A new will, Julian?" I asked, my voice thin, a tremor of disbelief running through it. Arthur never mentioned any changes to our arrangements. He was so clear about our legacy. Julian's smile tightened, becoming more of a grimace. "Oh, he kept it quiet for sure, wanted to surprise everyone, I think. He felt I needed a fresh start. Said he'd met with his lawyer a few weeks back. A Mr. Davies, I believe." My mind raced. Mr. Davies was indeed Arthur's lawyer, a kindly old man, a family friend who had handled our affairs for years, drafting our original will, guiding us through various legal complexities. But he would have informed me, he always did. He was a stickler for protocol, especially when it came to a couple like Arthur and me, whose lives were so intertwined. "I'm sure there's some mistake," I said, trying to keep my voice even, trying to project a calm I didn't feel. "Arthur and I always discussed these things. He would have told me." Julian merely shrugged, a dismissive gesture that ignited a spark of profound unease within me. "We'll see soon enough, I suppose. The reading is scheduled for next week. Mr. Davies' office." Next week, my husband, barely in the ground, his presence still a tangible warmth in the air, and already a stranger was talking about his future with our assets. My blood ran cold. The audacity of it, the sheer disrespect, was breathtaking. I observed Julian more closely for the remainder of the evening. He seemed to avoid direct eye contact, always looking over my shoulder or past my ear, as if he couldn't meet my gaze directly. And a flicker of something in his eyes, a calculating gleam, made me shiver. It was a look I'd seen before, on the faces of certain salesmen trying to close a deal, a look that spoke of hidden agendas and predatory intent. By the end of the night, as the last mourners departed, leaving the house in a somber quiet, the faint smell of lilies lingering, a cold certainty settled over me. Julian was up to something. And I, Eleanor, was not about to let him steal Arthur's legacy without a fight. My grief, which had been a heavy blanket, now felt like a sharpening stone, honing my resolve. Arthur deserved more than this. I deserved more than this. And I would get to the bottom of it, no matter what it took. The house, usually so comforting, now felt like a battleground. The days leading up to the will reading were a blur of restless nights and forced calm. The scent of furniture polish and stale grief permeated the air, a constant reminder of the void Arthur had left. I tried repeatedly to reach Mr. Davies, Arthur's lawyer, but his office was consistently closed, an impersonal answering machine message stating he was on extended leave. This was highly unusual. Mr. Davies, a man of meticulous habits and unwavering dedication, never took extended leave without prior notice, especially not in the midst of a client's passing. My unease festered into a growing suspicion. I called his home number only to reach his wife, Martha, who sounded flustered and vague. "Oh, he's just resting, dear. He's been so overworked lately. He's not really up to visitors or phone calls, I'm afraid." Her voice had an odd, strained quality, as if she were choosing her words carefully, a subtle hesitancy that spoke volumes. It was not the straightforward answer I expected from Martha, a woman known for her blunt honesty. Meanwhile, Julian continued to make himself at home, literally. He moved into the guest room, a room that had been meticulously prepared for visiting family, claiming he wanted to be close to the family during this difficult time. His presence was an irritating hum, a constant reminder of the impending battle. He ate our food, used our utilities, and even started making suggestions about rearranging the furniture. "Grandfather Arthur always said this armchair blocked the light," he remarked one morning, gesturing dismissively at my husband's favorite reading chair, worn smooth by years of use, a silent testament to Arthur's presence. My jaw tightened. "Arthur loved that chair, Julian. It stays. This is his home, and we respect his space." His casual appropriation of our family life was infuriating. He even started making demands about meal times and what groceries to buy, as if he were already the master of the house. The day of the will reading finally arrived, a Tuesday that felt heavier than any other, each second dragging by with agonizing slowness. Ethan and I arrived at Mr. Davies' office, a stately brick building on Main Street, only to be greeted not by Mr. Davies himself, but by a junior associate, a nervous young man named Paul, barely out of law school. Paul fidgeted with his tie, his gaze flickering between us and the closed door to Mr. Davies' inner office. "Mr. Davies is unable to attend today," Paul stammered, avoiding my gaze. "I'll be reading the will in his stead. He sends his sincerest regrets." My heart sank. This was a bad sign, an ominous precursor to the betrayal I sensed. Julian was already there, impeccably dressed in a suit that looked expensive, a smirk playing on his lips, a triumphant glint in his eyes. He sat opposite us, radiating a smug confidence that made my skin crawl. He offered a perfunctory nod, then looked expectantly at Paul, as if eager for the charade to begin. As Paul, his voice barely above a whisper, began to read, the words chilled me to the bone, each syllable a fresh wound. The new will, dated just a month prior, left a staggering 90% of Arthur's considerable estate, including this house, our beloved vacation cottage on the lake, and all his carefully accumulated investments, to Julian. The remaining 10% was a meager allowance for me, barely enough to cover a year's living expenses, and nothing for Ethan or our grandchildren, Lily and Sam. It was a complete obliteration of our life's work, a cruel mockery of Arthur's lifelong plans. My breath hitched in my throat. This was not Arthur. This was a grotesque parody of his wishes, a twisted perversion of his love for us. Arthur, a man who cherished family above all else, who had meticulously planned for our future, would never have done this. He would have faced me, explained himself, never blindsided me in such a callous manner. The will also mentioned an obscure charity, one Arthur had never expressed interest in, a small, unheard-of animal shelter in a town 50 miles away, receiving a small percentage. It felt like a random, tacked-on detail designed to add a veneer of legitimacy. But the signature, it was a crude, shaky scrawl, barely recognizable as Arthur's usual elegant, firm penmanship. His signature was always so precise, a testament to his methodical nature. And there was no mention of a witness. No names, no addresses, just a blank space where two witness signatures should have been. It was a glaring omission, a red flag flapping violently in my mind. "Where is the witness?" I demanded, my voice cutting through the stunned silence in the room, sharp and clear. Paul shuffled his papers nervously, his face paling, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. "The document indicates it was signed privately, Mrs. Heir. No witness was explicitly named in the official filing. It's a little unusual, but not strictly illegal in some interpretations, given the circumstances." Julian interjected smoothly, his voice dripping with feigned sympathy. "Grandfather Arthur was a private man, Heir. He said he didn't want a fuss, and he felt strongly about this. He explained it all to me. He wanted to make sure I was set up for life, given my struggles." His eyes held a triumphant glint, a barely suppressed gleam of victory. Ethan, who had been listening in stunned silence, his face a mask of disbelief, finally spoke up, his voice cracking with emotion. "This isn't right, Julian. Dad would never cut Mom out like this. She was his entire world. And that signature, it looks nothing like his. It's a messy scribble, not his elegant hand." Julian laughed, a short, sharp sound that grated on my nerves, echoing cruelly in the small office. "Grief can make people see things, Ethan. My grandfather's wishes are clear. It's perfectly legal." I pushed back my chair, the scraping sound loud and defiant, standing to my full height, my spine rigid. "This will is a forgery," I declared, my voice resonating with a newfound strength, each word a hammer blow against his deception. "Arthur would never betray his family, he would never betray me, and I will fight this. You will not get away with this, Julian, not while I still breathe." Julian merely raised an eyebrow, his smirk unwavering, a picture of arrogant self-assurance. "Good luck, Heir. The law is on my side, and I have the document to prove it." But he didn't know Heir. He didn't know the fierce love I had for Arthur, a love that would not allow his memory to be desecrated by a lie. As we left the lawyer's office, the weight of the will pressing down on me, I felt a familiar determination rise within me. This wasn't just about money or property. This was about Arthur's legacy, about proving he had not, in his final days, betrayed the people he loved most. The battle had just begun, and I, Heir, was ready for war. The injustice of the new will gnawed at me, a relentless ache in my chest. I spent sleepless nights replaying Paul's hesitant answers, Julian's smug confidence, and the haunting image of Arthur's uncharacteristic signature. My grief, which had been a paralyzing fog, transformed into a cold, focused anger, a burning fuel that propelled me forward. The first thing I did the next morning was contact Martha, Mr. Davies' wife, again. This time I pressed her harder, my voice firm but compassionate. "Martha, is Mr. Davies truly ill, or is something else going on? This will is not Arthur's work. I know his signature. I need to speak to him. Please, Martha, tell me the truth." Martha's voice cracked, a sound of fragile desperation. "Heir, I can't say much. He's been pressured, terribly pressured, by Julian. He came to the house, almost daily towards the end, demanding Arthur sign some papers. Arthur was very weak, confused. He barely knew what day it was sometimes. Mr. Davies tried to object, he really did, but Julian, he was very insistent. He threatened to report something, I don't know what, some vague accusation about Mr. Davies' handling of some old client's funds. My husband is now terrified, Heir. He had a minor stroke last week, Eleanor. The stress of it all was too much for him. My blood ran cold. A stroke, Julian's pressure. This was far worse than I imagined. Mr. Davies, a man of impeccable integrity, a pillar of the community, had been forced into this monstrous deception. Martha, I said, my voice gentle, imbued with a newfound urgency, please tell Mr. Davies that Arthur's family needs his help. We need the truth. His silence is only helping Julian. Tell him we will protect him. She promised, her voice laced with a faint hope, to pass on the message. My next call was to Arthur's closest friend, George, a retired detective with a sharp mind and an even sharper sense of justice. George listened patiently as I recounted everything, from Julian's sudden appearance to the suspicious will and Martha's cryptic, tearful confession. He didn't interrupt, simply absorbed every detail, his silence a comforting presence on the other end of the line. Eleanor, George said, his voice grave after a long pause. This sounds like classic elder abuse combined with outright fraud. You need an attorney, a damn good one, and you need someone to dig into Julian's past. A background check. Fast. George recommended Sarah, a formidable lawyer specializing in elder fraud cases. Her reputation preceded her, she was known as a bulldog in the courtroom. Sarah was sharp, direct, and immediately understood the gravity of the situation. Her office was neat, almost clinical, but her eyes held a spark of passionate determination. We'll file a contest to the will on grounds of undue influence and forgery, she stated, her voice firm, her eyes flashing with resolve. But we need evidence. Any strange behavior from Julian, any past issues, anything related to Arthur's health in the weeks before he died, we need it all. No detail is too small. While Sarah began the legal groundwork, filing preliminary papers and preparing the necessary motions, George started his own investigation into Julian. He was relentless, a bloodhound on the scent. He delved into public records, social media, and even discreetly interviewed distant relatives, posing as a curious genealogist. Within days, George had unearthed a disturbing pattern. Julian had a history of financial instability, mounting debts from failed ventures, and a series of failed business ventures that left a trail of unpaid creditors. He'd also recently had a significant falling out with his own parents, who had finally cut him off financially after years of bailing him out. He's desperate, Eleanor, George reported, his voice tinged with disgust. A classic opportunist, and he's been circling Arthur like a vulture for months, trying to get back into his good graces. He visited Arthur regularly in the last year, far more than anyone knew, especially after his parents cut him off. I remembered Arthur mentioning Julian's visits, dismissing them as the boy trying to reconnect, a kindly attempt to bridge family gaps. I had attributed it to Arthur's large heart, his desire for everyone to be part of our extended family. Now, I saw it for what it was, Julian's calculated manipulation, a predatory campaign to exploit Arthur's generosity and fading faculties. Then came a breakthrough that sent a jolt through me. George, through his network, found an old caretaker, Brenda, who had been with Arthur during his final weeks when he was particularly frail and susceptible. Brenda, initially reluctant to speak, fearing reprisal from Julian, finally confessed to George after he assured her of legal protection. Julian was there all the time, Mr. George, Brenda recounted, her voice trembling over the phone. He'd badger Mr. Arthur, making him sign papers, telling him they were important family documents for investments. Mr. Arthur was so confused some days, he'd sign anything. Julian would isolate him, saying he needed peace and quiet, so no one else could visit, not even Mrs. Eleanor. He'd even tried to get Mr. Arthur to sign things while he was drowsy from his medication. She even recalled Julian showing Arthur a crude, typed will, urging him to sign it, claiming it was for tax purposes and not a real will. Brenda said she had discreetly taken a photo of that document on her phone, troubled by what she saw, a premonition of something terribly wrong. She sent it to George, her hands shaking, finally revealing the damning truth. The photo confirmed my worst fears. It was a preliminary draft of the fraudulent will, with scribbled notes in Julian's own handwriting, outlining how to remove me from the inheritance and minimize Ethan's share. The pieces were falling into place, painting a picture of calculated, cruel manipulation. Arthur hadn't betrayed me, he had been betrayed, and Julian's carefully constructed facade was beginning to crumble under the weight of his own deceit. The fight was far from over, but now, armed with truth, I felt a powerful surge of hope. This wasn't just a battle for assets, it was a crusade for Arthur's dignity and the truth. With overwhelming evidence beginning to pile up from Martha and Brenda, Sarah, my formidable lawyer, moved swiftly. We filed an emergency injunction to freeze Arthur's assets, a legal maneuver that prevented Julian from accessing any funds from the disputed will. It was a strategic strike, meant to cut off his financial lifeline and prevent further damage. Julian, predictably, was furious. He called me, his voice sharp with thinly veiled threats laced with a venomous disbelief. "Eleanor, what is this nonsense? What are you doing? You're ruining everything. Grandfather Arthur would be so disappointed in your behavior. You're making a spectacle of this." I calmly replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the inner turmoil I felt. "Arthur would be disappointed in you, Julian. This is about his true wishes, not your greed, and I will not stand by and let you desecrate his memory." I hung up before he could respond, before he could launch into another tirade, my hands trembling slightly, but my resolve unshaken. His anger only confirmed my suspicions. It was the anger of a cornered man. Knowing Julian was still living in my home and potentially looking for more ways to exploit the situation, to find or destroy evidence, George suggested a bold, albeit uncomfortable, move. "We need to install a hidden camera in Arthur's study, Eleanor," George advised, his voice low and serious. "It's where he kept his important documents. Julian might try to find something to bolster his fraudulent claim, or more likely, remove anything that could expose him. We need to catch him in the act." Reluctantly, I agreed. The thought of a hidden camera in Arthur's sacred space, the room where he spent countless hours reading, writing, and contemplating, felt deeply intrusive, a violation of his privacy even in death. But the need for irrefutable evidence outweighed my discomfort. George discreetly placed a tiny camera disguised as a bookshelf ornament, nestled among Arthur's old leather-bound tomes, connected to a secure cloud server, allowing us to monitor the room remotely from Sarah's office. It was a silent, unblinking eye waiting. Days later, the camera caught Julian in action. He entered the study casually at first, humming a tuneless melody, then began rummaging through Arthur's old files, his movements increasingly frantic, his casual demeanor evaporating into frantic desperation. He muttered to himself, his words barely audible but clear enough through the camera's microphone. "Where is it? He said he hid it. The original copy, he swore he still had it." He pulled out a small, old leather-bound journal, flipped through it quickly, then threw it back onto the shelf in frustration, scattering a few papers. It was clear he was searching for something specific, something he believed Arthur had hidden. This confirmed he knew more than he let on about Arthur's true intentions, perhaps even about a different, real will that Julian had tried to suppress. Then came the intercepted call that truly blew the lid off the entire scheme. Sarah had obtained a court order to monitor Julian's phone, given the ongoing fraud investigation and the escalating nature of his threats. One evening, a call came through that made our hearts pound in our chests. It was Julian speaking to a shadowy figure named Leo. "The old woman is fighting back," Julian hissed into the phone, his voice tight with frustration and fear. "She's frozen the accounts, and Davies is acting like a scared rabbit. He's probably going to talk. We need to move faster. She's relentless." Leo's voice, raspy and cold, replied with chilling indifference. "Did you get rid of the witness yet? The one who actually signed the papers? He's a loose end, a very dangerous loose end. He needs to disappear completely." Julian hesitated, a moment of visible unease on his face. "He's gone. He's been paid handsomely and he's off the grid. He won't talk, I made sure of it." My blood ran cold. The witness wasn't Arthur's lawyer, Mr. Davies, as Julian had implied, but a paid imposter who had actually signed the forged will. This was a deep-seated conspiracy, not just a simple forgery executed by a desperate man. Leo then instructed Julian to plant a new piece of evidence in the house, an old, seemingly innocent letter from Arthur to Julian, vaguely praising his initiative and ambition, which Julian could present as proof of Arthur's supposed newfound favoritism and a more legitimate reason for the revised will. "Make it look like you just found it, Julian," Leo instructed. "Something heartfelt but vague, it'll throw them off the scent." Julian agreed, his voice tight with frustration. "I'll do it, but this is getting messy, Leo, very messy. I don't like it." The next morning, with a theatrical flourish captured perfectly by the hidden camera, Julian placed an old, yellowed letter, carefully folded to look like it had been tucked away for ages, on Arthur's desk, ensuring it was visible. He then discovered it, calling Ethan with feigned excitement to show him, pretending it was a recent, serendipitous find. "Ethan, you won't believe what I just found in grandfather's desk. A letter just for me?" Ethan, still trying to make sense of everything and desperate for any sign of his father's affection, called me, sounding confused and a little hopeful. "Julian just found this letter, Mom. It's from Dad, saying he's proud of Julian's spirit and ambition. Could it be true? Maybe Dad really did want to help him." I felt a surge of triumph mixed with profound disgust at Julian's continued manipulation. "Ethan," I said calmly, my voice firm, "don't believe a word of it. This is Julian's desperate attempt to manipulate us. He's setting a trap, trying to create doubt. Don't fall for it." The evidence was mounting, piece by agonizing piece. The hidden camera footage showed Julian searching for something specific and then meticulously planting the fabricated letter. The intercepted call revealed not just a co-conspirator, but the chilling truth about the witness, a hired hand, not a legitimate party. We now knew not only that the will was a blatant forgery, but that Julian had paid someone to impersonate Arthur's signature and had colluded with another, more sinister individual to orchestrate this elaborate scheme. The web of deceit was unraveling, thread by thread, and Julian was trapped in his own sticky creation, unknowingly tightening the noose around his own neck with every desperate maneuver. With an arsenal of overwhelming evidence in hand, Sarah advised a strategic confrontation. "We need to shake Julian, make him think we know more than we do, push him into a corner where he has no choice but to confess or reveal more." I hesitated. The thought of a direct confrontation with the man who had so cruelly betrayed Arthur's memory, who had manipulated my husband in his final, vulnerable days, filled me with dread and a deep-seated anger. But Sarah's words resonated. "He's a bully, Eleanor. Bullies back down when faced with strength and irrefutable proof. Your courage now will save you countless headaches later." We planned a private meeting at Sarah's sleek, modern office. I insisted Ethan be present, not just for moral support but to witness Julian's unraveling firsthand. Ethan, still wrestling with the cognitive dissonance of his father's new will, needed to see the undeniable truth. When Julian arrived, he swaggered in, impeccably dressed, radiating his false confidence like a cheap cologne. He nodded curtly at us, a dismissive gesture. "What is this, another futile attempt to deny grandfather Arthur's clear wishes?" he sneered, a condescending smirk plastered on his face. "Frankly, Eleanor, this is getting tedious." Sarah, however, wasted no time on pleasantries. Her face was a mask of professional severity. Without a word, she projected the hidden camera footage onto a large screen dominating the wall of her conference room. The grainy but clear images showed Julian in Arthur's study rummaging through papers, then carefully, almost meticulously, placing the forged letter on the desk. Julian's face, initially smug, paled instantly, his jaw slacked. "What is this? This is an outrageous invasion of privacy. You can't do this," he stammered, his bravado quickly evaporating like mist in the sun. He looked around wildly, as if searching for an escape route. "It's evidence, Julian," Sarah stated calmly, her voice devoid of emotion, each word a cold, hard stone. "Evidence of your attempts to manufacture proof to support a fraudulent will. A clear effort to mislead and deceive." Then she played a snippet of the intercepted phone call, Leo's raspy voice discussing the witness and the chilling need for him to disappear. The sound of Leo's cold, dispassionate tone filled the room, sending a shiver down my spine. Julian froze, his eyes wide with stark fear, his face draining of all color. That's not what it sounds like. You're twisting things," he blustered, but his voice lacked any conviction, a desperate, pathetic attempt at denial. Ethan, who had watched the footage and listened to the call in stunned silence, his face a mixture of shock and dawning horror, finally erupted. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly on the floor. "Julian, how could you? This is disgusting. You manipulated Dad, you forged his will, and you tried to steal everything from Mom. This is beyond comprehension." Julian turned to Ethan, his face contorted in a desperate plea, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. "Ethan, listen, please, I can explain. It's not what you think. You don't understand the pressure I was under." But Sarah wasn't done. She held up a thick file. "We also have a sworn statement from Brenda, the caretaker," she announced, her voice unwavering, detailing how you repeatedly pressured a frail and confused Arthur into signing papers, how you isolated him, and how you showed him a crude draft will. She then projected the photo Brenda had secretly taken of the crude draft will onto the screen, Julian's own scribbled notes about removing a leaner from the inheritance glaringly obvious. And we have a partial testimony from Mr. Davies, Arthur's own lawyer, confirming he was pressured and forced to take leave due to your actions. Faced with such overwhelming and undeniable proof, Julian's composure shattered completely. He slumped into the chair, his shoulders shaking, his carefully constructed facade crumbling into pathetic pieces. He was so old, he whispered, his voice cracking, barely audible. He was slipping, he barely knew what he was doing sometimes. And I needed money. My investments, they went south, everything collapsed. I was desperate, a leaner, truly desperate. I saw an opportunity and I took it. He looked up, his eyes pleading, filled with a raw, desperate fear. It was just a temporary solution. I was going to pay it all back, I swear, once I got back on my feet. Then came the truly unexpected confession, a final, painful twist in the knife. The witness that wasn't Leo, Julian choked out, his voice thick with tears and snot. It was my uncle Leo, my mother's brother. He's a con artist, always has been, a real lowlife. He helped me find someone to sign the papers. Some down on his luck guy he knew from his old poker games, a drifter. We paid him a few thousand to sign it, then he vanished. Leo said it was foolproof. He said no one would ever find him. My heart ached. Not only had Julian betrayed Arthur, but he had dragged another family member, Leo, into his web of deceit. The idea of Leo, Arthur's own stepbrother, involved in this cold, calculated fraud was a bitter pill to swallow, a further desecration of Arthur's memory. Julian continued, rambling, confessing more details about how he had isolated Arthur, fabricating stories to make Arthur believe he was alone, and that Julian was his only true support. I told him you were too busy, a leaner, or unwell. That Ethan was preoccupied. Anything to keep you away. He spoke of how he had meticulously planned to gain Arthur's trust, how he had researched Arthur's assets, and how he had convinced his uncle Leo to help him forge the will, promising him a cut. I overheard grandfather Arthur talking to Brenda once about a new will, how he wanted to make sure everything went to Eleanor and Ethan, exactly as it was, Julian sobbed. That's when I knew I had to act fast. I changed the will after that, just enough to benefit me. I didn't want to hurt anyone, really, just get by. I thought I was smarter than everyone. His confession, though pathetic and self-serving, confirmed everything. It revealed the depth of his manipulation, his calculated cruelty, and the sheer audacity of his scheme. Ethan looked at him with a mixture of disgust and profound pity. You didn't just want to get by, Julian. You wanted to take everything. You betrayed grandfather Arthur's trust in the cruelest way possible. You betrayed his memory. Sarah closed her file with a decisive snap, her expression grim. Julian, this is a formal admission of fraud and undue influence. This will be used against you in court, every word. Julian buried his face in his hands, completely defeated, his earlier arrogance a distant memory. The confrontation had worked. The truth, finally, had shattered his carefully constructed lies, and he was left exposed, raw, and utterly alone. The courtroom buzzed with an electric air of anticipation, a tangible hum of whispered speculation and curious onlookers. News of the contested will, coupled with the scandalous allegations of fraud and a vanishing witness, had spread through our quiet town like wildfire, turning a private family tragedy into a public spectacle. I sat beside Sarah, my lawyer, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, feeling the weight of months of anguish and struggle. Opposite us, Julian sat with his own counsel, looking pale and significantly less arrogant than before, his shoulders slumped in defeat, a stark contrast to the smug man who had demanded my house. Ethan sat behind me, his silent presence a tangible comfort, his hand occasionally resting on my shoulder in a gesture of unwavering support. The hearing began with Sarah presenting our case, her voice clear and resonant, filling the hushed courtroom. She laid out the timeline with meticulous precision. Julian's sudden, unexplained reappearance in Arthur's life, the peculiar timing of the new will just weeks before Arthur's passing, and the immediate, cold-blooded attempt to disinherit me and Ethan, eradicating decades of Arthur's expressed wishes. She painted a picture not of a loving family member, but of a calculated predator. She then called Mr. Davies, Arthur's longtime lawyer, to the stand. Mr. Davies, still frail from his recent stroke but remarkably resolute, his voice trembling slightly but his words firm, testified about Julian's persistent and aggressive behavior, his unsettling attempts to pressure a weakened and confused Arthur, and his own desperate attempts to intervene and protect his client. Mr. Julian insisted on a private signing without official witnesses, Mr. Davies recounted, his gaze fixed on the judge. It was highly irregular, completely against Mr. Arthur's usual meticulous approach to legal matters. I had never seen him so insistent, so forceful. It was clear Mr. Arthur was not fully cognizant of what he was signing. Next, Sarah presented Brenda's sworn affidavit, the former caretaker's testimony detailing Julian's systematic isolation of Arthur and her chilling observation of Julian making Arthur sign papers he clearly didn't understand. She projected the photo Brenda had secretly taken of Julian's crude draft will onto a large screen mounted for the jury, the handwritten notes about removing a lien from the inheritance glaringly obvious, a stark, undeniable indictment of his greed. The jury, a diverse group of townspeople whose faces ranged from stern to sympathetic, gasped audibly, a collective murmur rippling through the room. Then came the most damning evidence. Sarah played the hidden camera footage, showing Julian meticulously planting the fabricated letter in Arthur's study, then desperately rummaging through old files. The silence in the courtroom was absolute, broken only by the faint whir of the projector. You could feel the collective outrage emanating from the jury box. Julian squirmed in his seat, his face a mottled red, his eyes fixed on the floor. Following this, Sarah played the recording of the intercepted phone call between Julian and his uncle Leo, their chilling conversation about the witness and the need for him to vanish, their callous discussion of an elderly man's vulnerability. Julian's lawyer immediately sprang to his feet, objecting vehemently, citing illegal wiretapping, but Sarah had obtained a lawful, detailed warrant for the recording, demonstrating its crucial necessity in uncovering a major fraud. The judge, after a brief review, allowed it. The sound of Leo's voice, cold and calculating, talking about paying someone to impersonate Arthur's signature, sealed Julian's fate in the eyes of everyone present. Julian's lawyer, a stout man with a booming voice, tried desperately to argue that Julian was merely a misguided nephew, acting out of grief and profound financial desperation, manipulated by his more experienced Uncle Leo. He attempted to paint Julian as a victim of circumstances, not a perpetrator, a young man overwhelmed by his own struggles. He cross-examined me, trying to portray me as a bitter, vengeful widow, unwilling to accept Arthur's final wishes, driven by my own sense of entitlement. Mrs. Aliner, isn't it true that you and Mr. Arthur had significant disagreements recently regarding his financial decisions? He thundered. I looked him dead in the eye, my voice clear and unwavering. Arthur and I had been married for 50 years. Like any couple, we had occasional disagreements, but our love, our trust, and our shared vision for our family's future were unwavering. He would never have betrayed me or our son, not in a million years. My answer hung in the air, a testament to our unbreakable bond. When Julian took the stand, he was a shell of his former arrogant self. His suit, once sharp, seemed to hang loosely on his now thin frame. He stammered, contradicted himself, and eventually, under Sarah's relentless, precise cross-examination, he broke down, repeating his confession from Sarah's office, his voice a choked whisper. I was desperate, he sobbed, tears streaming down his face. I thought I could get away with it. Leo told me it was foolproof. He said no one would ever know. He even, inadvertently, gave enough details about the witness, the paid signatory for George to begin tracking him down with renewed vigor. The jury listened intently, their expressions grim, faces showing a mixture of disgust and quiet fury. Julian's performance was not one of a grieving nephew, but a cornered, manipulative fraudster, pathetic in his desperation. The weight of the evidence was undeniable. The truth, slowly and painstakingly unearthed, laid bare Julian's cruel deceit, his calculated betrayal of the very man who had once offered him a hand. As the final arguments concluded, and the jury retired for deliberation, I felt a strange sense of exhaustion and profound relief. The battle was nearly over. The fight to protect Arthur's memory, his true wishes, and his family was close to its conclusion. The air in the courtroom, once thick with tension, now felt lighter, almost hopeful. The jury deliberation felt like an eternity. Every minute stretched into an hour, each tick of the clock echoing in the vast silence of the courthouse waiting room. As I sat, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, feeling the accumulated weight of months of anguish and struggle pressing down on me. Ethan sat beside me, his presence a steady anchor in the swirling anxiety, his hand occasionally reaching out to squeeze mine. We spoke little, lost in our own thoughts, replaying the courtroom drama, waiting for the inevitable. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, the bailiff appeared, his face unreadable, giving nothing away. All rise. The courtroom was packed, the anticipation thick in the air, a collective intake of breath. Julian stood, his face ashen, his eyes darting nervously around the room, a picture of profound fear. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat. The foreman of the jury stood, a stout woman with a compassionate but firm gaze, her voice clear and resonant, filling every corner of the silent room. We the jury find in favor of the petitioner, Eleanor, and rule that the will presented by Julian is indeed fraudulent and was obtained under undue influence. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom, followed by a surging wave of hushed whispers, quickly suppressed by the judge's stern gaze. Julian slumped, his lawyer putting a comforting but clearly defeated hand on his shoulder. His carefully constructed world had just imploded. The judge then spoke, his voice firm and authoritative, leaving no room for doubt. The court hereby revokes the validity of the purported will. All assets and properties of the deceased, Arthur, shall revert to the terms of his original, valid will, dated 30 years prior and amended periodically, leaving everything to his wife, Eleanor, and then to his son, Ethan, and his descendants. Furthermore, due to the admitted fraud and attempted manipulation of the deceased, the court will be referring this matter to the district attorney for criminal investigation into elder abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud and forgery. This court takes the exploitation of vulnerable individuals very seriously. A wave of relief so profound it nearly buckled my knees washed over me, a physical lightness after months of carrying such a heavy burden. Justice. Sweet, undeniable justice. Arthur's wishes were honored, his legacy was safe. As the judge delivered his final pronouncements, a quiet tear escaped my eye, not of sorrow, but of an overwhelming, grateful release. Outside the courtroom, George and Sarah embraced me, their faces alight with a shared triumph. "Eleanor, you did it," George said, a proud smile on his face, his eyes twinkling. "You fought for Arthur and won. You showed him what integrity truly means." Sarah added, her voice filled with admiration, "This is a significant victory, Eleanor, not just for you and your family, but for every elderly person who has been preyed upon by those they trust. Your courage will set a precedent." Julian, led away by stern-faced bailiffs, passed us, his eyes meeting mine for a fleeting, painful moment. There was no defiance, no anger, only a vacant, defeated stare, a hollow echo of the cunning man he once was. "I'm sorry, Eleanor," he mumbled, so quietly I almost didn't hear him, his voice barely a whisper, devoid of true remorse born only of his downfall. It was a pathetic, empty apology offered too late. I simply nodded, turning my back on him, refusing to give his words any more power. His apology meant nothing, his actions had spoken volumes, and the court had delivered its verdict. In the days that followed, the legal process unfolded with satisfying speed. The original valid will was reinstated, ensuring that Arthur's estate, including our beloved Victorian home, the tranquil vacation cottage on the lake, and all his carefully managed investments would pass directly to me, and then to Ethan and our grandchildren, Lily and Sam, as Arthur had always intended. Julian was formally charged, and the search for Leo and the actual signatory of the forged will intensified. News eventually filtered through that the witness, the paid signatory, had been apprehended in another state, thanks to the details Julian inadvertently provided during his emotional courtroom breakdown. He was a small-time con artist, confirming Julian's confession and providing further corroboration for the criminal case. The house, once a place of tension and deceit, where Julian's shadow had loomed, now felt like a sanctuary again, filled with light and genuine love. Ethan and our grandchildren, Lily and Sam, came over often. We sat in Arthur's study, no longer looking for hidden clues or fearing watchful cameras, but sharing memories, the soft laughter of children filling the space that had once held so much quiet anguish. Lily, wise beyond her years, drew a picture of me, standing strong with a shield emblazoned with a heart titled Grandma Eleanor, the protector of Grandpa's love. It hung proudly on the fridge, a poignant reminder of the battle we had fought and won. Months passed, and the sharp echoes of the courtroom drama gradually faded, replaced by the comforting, predictable rhythm of everyday life. The criminal case against Julian proceeded with the efficiency that comes with irrefutable evidence. With the overwhelming proof, including his own confession and the corroborating testimonies, he eventually pleaded guilty to several charges, including grand theft, fraud, and elder abuse. His uncle, Leo, and the paid signatory were also apprehended, facing their own legal consequences, adding another layer of legal validation to our harrowing ordeal. Julian received a sentence that, while not erasing the profound pain he caused, affirmed that justice had been served, and that society would not tolerate such calculated exploitation. It was a solemn reminder that deceit, no matter how carefully planned, eventually unravels, leaving ruin in its wake. Our home, the very centerpiece of Julian's avarice, the target of his cruel machinations, once again became a true haven of peace and love. I spent my days surrounded by family, by Arthur's cherished books, and by the countless memories that permeated every plank of flooring, every sun-dappled window pane. The forced smile I'd worn during the initial days of Julian's manipulations was replaced by a deep, genuine contentment that radiated from within. Ethan and I often sat on the porch swing, sipping tea, discussing Arthur's life, sharing anecdotes that brought forth waves of laughter and tears, reminding us of his quick wit, his quiet wisdom, and his boundless affection. "Dad would be so proud of you, Mom," Ethan would often say, his voice thick with emotion, his eyes conveying a profound respect. Those words were a balm to my soul, soothing the last lingering remnants of the trauma. Driven by a renewed sense of purpose, I established a small foundation in Arthur's name, dedicated to supporting elder rights and providing legal aid to victims of elder fraud. It was a way to channel my painful experience into something profoundly positive, to ensure that other families wouldn't have to endure the same brutal ordeal without support and advocacy. I became an active advocate, sharing my story at community events, not to dwell on the anguish, but to empower others, to educate them on the subtle signs of manipulation and the resources available. My voice, once silenced by grief and then by Julian's deceit, now rang with clarity and purpose, a beacon of hope for those navigating similar betrayals, a testament to resilience. One sunny afternoon, I found Sam, my bright-eyed grandson, poring over one of Arthur's old history books in the study, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Grandma Aliner," he asked, looking up, his voice filled with childlike sincerity, "was Grandpa Arthur really a hero like in the books?" My heart swelled with love and pride. "He was, Sam," I replied, sitting beside him, my arm wrapping around his small shoulders. "Not with a sword, but with his integrity, his kindness, and his unwavering love for his family. He taught us the most important lessons about honesty and fighting for what's right." I explained to him in an age-appropriate way the importance of trust and how some people, driven by their own emptiness, try to take advantage of others, but that good always prevails if you stand firm. Sam listened intently, his young face serious, absorbing every word. Later that week, we visited Arthur's grave. The lilies were in full bloom again, their sweet fragrance a gentle reminder of his comforting presence, a cycle of life continuing. I spoke to him quietly, telling him about the foundation, about Sam's innocent but profound question, about the peace we had reclaimed in our home. "You're safe now, Arthur," I whispered, a single tear finally tracing a path down my cheek, not of sorrow but of overwhelming, profound gratitude. "Your legacy is safe, your wishes are honored, and we, your family, are stronger than ever because of you." The entire experience had irrevocably changed me. I was no longer the somewhat naive, trusting woman who had nearly lost everything she held dear. I was stronger, wiser, and immeasurably more resilient. The betrayal had been a fierce crucible, forging my spirit and sharpening my resolve. I had learned that family, even when fractured by deceit, could be mended by truth and justice, by the unwavering courage of love. And that the bonds of love, particularly those forged over a lifetime, were unbreakable, a powerful force capable of withstanding any challenge, even the most insidious form of betrayal. As I sat in Arthur's old reading chair each evening, a warm cup of herbal tea warming my hands, the gentle glow of the lamp illuminating the familiar room, I often thought of Julian. Not with anger, for that bitterness had long since receded, but with a quiet understanding of the profound emptiness that must have driven him to such desperate acts. His greed had cost him everything, his freedom, his reputation, and any semblance of respect. Meanwhile, my unwavering fight for truth had restored everything, my home, my family's legacy, and my own sense of peace. The house stood, solid and enduring, a silent, powerful testament to true love and an unyielding spirit. Every creak of the floorboards, every beam of sunlight filtering through the windows, seemed to whisper Arthur's name, a constant, comforting presence, a profound reminder that the true inheritance was not just property or wealth, but the unbreakable spirit of family, honor, and enduring love. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the story, please make sure to subscribe and leave your thoughts in the comments.